Welcome to the Weekend News Magazine. Viewpoint this Sunday. This is Jody O'Malley in for Malcolm Out Loud this weekend. Today, we'll be exploring the complexities of immigration policy and the significant challenges in communication between agencies. Our focus will be on the implications for unaccompanied migrant children, shedding light on the critical issues they face within the system, and discuss how policy decisions affect vulnerable population. On the second segment, we'll delve into the critical intersection of politics and disaster response, exploring how recent crises have the potential to shape electoral outcomes and influence leadership accountability. Our conversation will focus on the complexities of managing crises in a political landscape, emphasizing the role of leadership and the implications of governmental response and the dynamics at play when disasters become intertwined with political narratives. In this first segment, we will be discussing with Mrs. Tara Rodas. She's been a public servant for more than 21 years, 18 of which have been dedicated to serving the federal inspector general who answered the call to support the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in caring for migrant children at the southern border. As a subject matter expert on sponsored fraud and child trafficking within HHS's Unaccompanied Children program, she served as deputy to the director at the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site. Her work led to crucial referrals to HHS office on trafficking in persons and other federal law enforcement agencies. Tara has testified before Congress on these issues and is a fellow at the Center of Research Excellence to counter human trafficking. We will also bring in Bonnie Rice. She's been a dedicated advocate for human trafficking victims since 2011. She became a certified victims advocate for sexual assault in 2015. And in 2016, she expanded her certifications to include human trafficking victims and domestic violence victims in 2018. Bonnie has undergone extensive training within agencies such as the FBI Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force and Homeland Security Investigations. Alongside her advocacy, she has volunteered with undocumented immigrant communities since the late 1990s. In 2020, she earned a master's degree in sociology from New Mexico State University, focusing on immigration and its intersection with trafficking. Recognized as a subject matter expert in her field, Bonnie is now starting her own training institute to educate others and combat sexual violence and human trafficking. And on the second half, Nurse Nicole, who has nearly 2 decades of experience as an acute bedside nurse, currently practicing in Central Florida, she advocates for informed consent and bodily sovereignty while addressing the stigma faced by unvaxxed nurses. As a volunteer with American Frontline Nurses during the pandemic, Nicole fights against injustices in healthcare and collaborates with grassroots organizations like Florida Freedom Keepers and Health Freedom Florida. Her commitment to improving the healthcare system is evident in her active participation in local and state communities where she proudly holds the line. So we have several articles coming out, guys. We have these complexities that are surrounding unaccompanied migrant children and the related policies. We have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost, says J.D. Vance. This is not a missing kids problem. It's a missing paperwork problem, Jonathan Beer Arcacia Center for Justice says. All of these factors can explain some of the deficiencies, and the conclusion that the children are missing could be very, very premature, says Raul Pinto, American Immigration Council. We are concerned that the report's findings are misleading and may be misconstrued because they fail to acknowledge key facts, says Carmen Hills, ICE spokesman. And experts say the claims regarding missing migrant children may lack significant context. Tara, let me bring you in as the HHS whistleblower on child-sponsored trafficking. Is that how you say it, child?
So I usually say it is government-sponsored, taxpayer-funded child trafficking. It's $6 billion a year that the federal government is paying for the logistical chain of the delivery of smuggled children from the border to the traffickers here in the United States. So it's government-sponsored, taxpayer-funded child trafficking.
There you go. Yes, and you know, we're going to address this more in depth, guys, tomorrow, where I speak to Tara and Bonnie on Nurses Out Loud. We'll be discussing it a little bit more in depth. But any of those quotes or headlines speak to you?
Yeah, well, the thing that's interesting is that we keep using the word missing, when in fact, the data exists at HHS. They have the data of who the children were who crossed the border. They also have the data of who the so-called sponsor is, who the child was delivered to. We do know that last known address. We do know criminal history on some of the sponsors, because a brave DHS whistleblower, Aaron Stevenson, revealed that some of them are on the transnational organized crime watch list. So we have a lot of information about the children. The challenge is that HHS, it's unthinkable. They refuse to share the data. Even when law enforcement, our great Homeland Security investigations, is giving like subpoenas to HHS, give us this information, we're trying to find these kids, because they will not fully comply with subpoenas. Even HSI, Homeland Security investigations, can only find 4% of their targets. They're being stonewalled. This is unacceptable. This is a travesty of justice that there are children missing that could be rescued today, and HHS won't turn over the data. There are criminal sponsors today abusing children. They could be, again, the children could be rescued today, will not turn over the data.
So HHS will not turn over the data to who?
To anyone who's looking for the children. They will not share it with Homeland Security investigations, who is the one who specializes in child trafficking. They will not turn it over to the Inspector General community, so they could begin looking at patterns of fraud. So for example, when we see that children, say 100 children have been delivered to one address, they would know immediately. They could prioritize who to go after, which children to go find. They won't give the data to anyone. They won't give the data to Congress, not to the House, not to the Senate. They're just stonewalling the data. It's unthinkable. They are responsible for the suffering of children. Children could be rescued. Criminals could be prosecuted if they had access to the data.
That's insane to even think about that. They are, well, why are they not wanting to share the data? What's HHS saying?
Well, sadly, the fact is they value the anonymity of their criminal sponsor over the safety of the child. And they actually said that, using different words, when they severed their sharing agreement at the beginning of 2021. HHS severed the agreement with DHS. And they said the reason is it puts a chilling effect on the sponsor. So sponsors, a majority, have no legal presence in the country. So they come forward to sponsor these children, and this government right now cares more about the anonymity of that sponsor than they do the safety of the child. And they said so. We don't want a chilling effect. We want everyone to come forward. So we don't want you to be scared if you're 18th Street gang. Nope, we don't want a chilling effect on you sponsoring a child. Oh, you're MS-13? We don't want there to be a chilling effect. So we're going to sever our sharing agreement. And that's what they did at the beginning of 2021. It was a total failure on the part of children.
So as soon as Biden takes office, essentially, they sever this contract.
Yes.
Wow.
It's a memorandum of understanding. Yes. That was just one major misstep that created this firestorm and this humanitarian crisis, and a 1,300% increase of children calling a hotline saying that they're being abused, neglected, and trafficked. And today I spoke with a nurse who said, and she's going to be sending me the data because we're hearing reports from nurses of young migrant girls giving birth at like 10, 11, 12 years old, having sexually transmitted diseases. And today, a nurse told me that, she's got evidence of 7-year-olds with sexually transmitted diseases. So policies have consequences, and they made some major missteps in thinking about risk management for children.
Right. Wow. Bonnie, any thoughts on that?
I don't know that I would. Tara's very forgiving and kind and thinks the best of things. I don't see them as missteps. The fact that that MOU was severed before they opened those floodgates, I think it was a calculated step, personally. I think that it was part of this whole desire to just run these children right through the program and to just get them here as quickly as they can. They knew what was coming. They had a full knowledge of the amount of unaccompanied children that were coming towards the border, and they severed that MOU on purpose, that memorandum of understanding to share information with DPSS. So I see it more nefarious than just overlooking or just making missteps.
Yeah.
And then, sorry.
That's a good thing about it being on Viewpoint this Sunday, is that we all have our views, which I absolutely love this format and respect it. We're all independent thinkers. We have 2 HHS whistleblowers, and we have 2 nurses on here too. So yeah, I hear you. I absolutely do think I would agree with you a little bit more, Bonnie, and say that I don't think that is a mishap, that it seems like, okay, as soon as Biden takes office, all of these policies, like, let's open up the border, right? Let's flood the border, come to America. Let's create a border czar, Kamala Harris, who's never even going to go down there and check out the border. And then let's sever any agreement, memorandum of understanding that our agencies who are supposed to be protecting us, HHS, Department of Homeland Security, now we're going to sever their ties, that they can't even communicate with each other. It just, to me, is absolutely preposterous. So Jonathan Beer, Acacia Center for Justice, says this is not a missing kids problem. It's a missing paperwork problem. Bonnie, would you agree with that?
To an extent, we need the paperwork. We need all of that. However, I wouldn't consider them lost children. I would consider them just ignored children. And so that's where you could say, that paperwork is missing, that documentation is missing, but it's out there. To Tara's point of those nurses that are documenting those children, we at NGOs, I work for a rape crisis center where we also help out victims of trafficking. We have a partner agency where they are seeing children, just young children, coming in and saying ORR did not process our sponsor properly. And unfortunately, ORR did process their sponsor according to their regulations and what they wanted. So that paper trail is there of who that sponsor was. So it's not just that paper trail, those papers that are, that statement is referring to, but they need to have actual documentation. They need to have all of that on the forefront to bring it forward. They're not even documenting when they process those children to send them to the sponsor. They have nowhere near the documentation and the verification that they need. So even if we found the paperwork is insufficient in and of itself.
Right. So we are very concerned that the report's findings are misleading and may be construed because they fail to acknowledge key facts, says Carmen Hill's ICE spokesperson. So Carmen Hill says that these misleading, the findings are misleading. Tara, how would you answer her concerns that, like, how can we ensure that the information about unaccompanied migrant children is communicated accurately and responsibly?
Yes. Well, I think when I testified the very first time before Congress in 23, I said the solution is transparency, right? We need transparency around the information. And it's simple. We just have the ability to look at the UAC portal database. We're able to compare that with other law enforcement data that would come from Department of Homeland Security, for example, the Transnational Organized Crime Watch List. We would be able to marry up this data. The Inspector General community has the authority under the IG Empowerment Act to do data matching across agencies. We could start to get a better picture of what's happening. There would be no confusion about who has what child. Once we were able to get that data, we would then be able to pull records from, like, Postal Service, for example. We would be able to just say, okay, let's match all of the addresses where the children were sent to what type of an address is it? Is it a hotel? Is it a bank? Is it a brothel? What is it? There's all kinds of data that exists. Could do the medical records. Well, how many of these unaccompanied children presented at the hospital with crisis type situations? Like, were they raped? Do they have sexually transmitted diseases, at 7 years old? The data exists. It's just a matter of putting the picture together. Then there would be no confusion.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, does this sound kind of familiar to you as a nurse, like in regards to how HHS operates, and any thoughts on this?
Absolutely. Again, what I'm hearing is that our government agencies are corrupt. They're protecting the criminals. We saw this a lot during the pandemic, where we had data that was being captured that was failed to be sent out to the public for transparency, to show what was really going on. And it's just really unfortunate that we have these innocent children who are coming through, our borders and are being let down time and time again, and that we have things that can be put into place. Tara said, and it's clearly not happening. And the question we should be asking is, why do they not want that to happen? What's the reason why we have so many things that could be put in place to put out to the public, and they're choosing not to do that, even if to remain anonymous and have these people come in and continue to want to. Again, it's, why are we protecting these criminals? They're criminals. They should be treated as end of story.
Right, absolutely. We have criminals, and it was interesting to hear too, Tara, how you said, a simple like data search, and to show, like, did these children go to the same address? 100 children go to the same address. Even 5 children go to the same address. And those addresses, are they sexual predators that they went to? I know in the movie, The Line in the Sand, where I reunited with Tara and met Bonnie this past week. This is James O'Keefe's new movie that documents his 10-month journey at the border and shows how the children and the NGOs and everybody operates there. And I saw these 2 ladies there at that premiere. What are your thoughts on that, Tara?
Yeah, the movie, I think, gives people a one of a kind experience of seeing with their own eyes what's happening. Instead of hearing the narrative that's being pushed that, hey, it's humanitarian, you actually get to see the suffering of the people. You get to see the fear, the threats. You get to see with your own eyes, like a small child standing at the border alone. Like, how does that happen? And you get to see the journey through these contractors and NGOs that are making billions of dollars off of the crisis. You're seeing like contractors like Southwest Key, where all of their executives are all making over $500,000 a year, some in excess of $1 million a year. And yet Southwest Key has recently been indicted by the Department of Justice for sexually abusing children as young as 5. So you get to see what's really happening. And I strongly encourage everybody to see this one of a kind film that's being put out by Tucker Carlson Network, Line in the Sand. Line in the Sand. Everybody should see the movie and see for themselves what's really happening. And then ask why that's being hidden. Why are you not seeing that on every news station? Why is CNN not running this? Why especially is this not being run by Univision and Telemundo? Why is this being hidden, especially from the Latino community? Why is that? So I think people should watch Line in the Sand.
Right, especially, with you, your husband, he's Latino, my ex is Latino, and I'm very familiar with the culture. And it's very much a family first culture. And the fact that it is not on these I hate calling them mainstream media, but mainstream, right? Quote unquote, what they are. I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, we'd say mainstream. Now it's not necessarily, right? Because so many people's eyes have been open to this. It is interesting that they do not show that or talk about it. I mean, this is a lot of children, ladies. This is not, just a few. This crisis is way worse than what we have even done to them during COVID, right? Where we stopped educating them, where we kept them at home with their abusers, where abuse situations and neglect and malnutrition and sicknesses did not go noticed because they weren't at school where these types of cases are typically reported. I just think, kind of taking a little bit of a turn here. What do you think, Bonnie, in regards to how it seems like our children may be targeted? Do you feel like our children have been targeted?
As far as by traffickers?
Yeah, traffickers, um, what we're teaching them, locking them down, putting, yellow tape, caution signs on their playground equipment. I mean, 320,000 children going missing. I don't even think there were that many people that probably, or children that tested positive with COVID. I mean,
Yeah,
seriously, I mean, that's exaggerating, but you hear what I'm saying.
yeah. No, I think that there's really a definite shift in our society away from, protecting children, treating children as the next generation that's going to lead our society. We're really more just pushing them to the background and telling them to just suffer with what you've got and figure it out. And I think it's really detrimental to not only the children that we have now, the unaccompanied children coming across the border. They really are told to suck it up and just deal with what's going on in their lives. And even when they call back home, they don't. I've been down to Honduras and talked with people that are from the campos, the communities that send these children, and they have no idea what's going on with these children once they get here because the children don't want to tell them, because we just as a society expect children to just deal with what they're handed, and if they can't, well, then they'll have to figure it out. And I think that's becoming more and more true across even socioeconomic levels. That may have been true for a long time for those lower socioeconomic classes, but it's even pervasive into the older, or I'm sorry, the more higher socioeconomic levels now, where the children are just on a certain level, they're almost neglected and not given what they need to grow up and be safe, happy, healthy adults ready to lead, society and ready to lead this country.
Yeah. Yeah. Nicole, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that we're creating societies of, raising up children to become productive members of society?
I mean, as a mom who has two small boys, I can tell you that the shift that I've noticed is, where did they start? They started targeting, the fathers and trying to remove them from the household. We now have, single moms that are, younger, having children, having to work. In this economy, you have to have at least two incomes. So your children are, not necessarily being, watched, if you will. And most of them have to go to daycares, and they have to go to aftercare programs, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But, again, they're not as much in the home. And then what do? We've pumped out social media and these expectations that are unrealistic. We have the worst mental health crisis in the United States, with low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, from adults down to children. And so, of course, unfortunately, that's a trickle down effect. If you have, parents, or a parent that has mental health, issues that is not well maintained, that can go to the children. And so, unfortunately, they're creating it so that our children are weak. They're not able to think for themselves. They have low self-esteem. We don't put them in certain activities anymore because everything's, online, or, socially disconnected. And so it's really unfortunate that they're being told and taught in these schools what to think, how to think, and, pitting each other against one another, dividing us, if you will, even more. And then, they're not able to really fend for themselves. They're not being able to be well-rounded in many areas because there's so many things lacking. So no, I do not think that they are setting them up for success. And even as a parent who is, I'm married, and we have really good foundation, and we work really hard, and we teach our boys, you can still do every single thing right, and they be put into society, and it just crumble because of every evil force around them that's trying to get to them. It's very difficult. And my heart breaks for this generation and the generations to come, especially what happened during COVID. It's just a terrible trickle down effect. And we're just seeing just some of the ramifications now, not even all of them. So I can see where we have a higher instance of mental health issues, runaways, low self-esteem, and these social media apps where they're being lured in, if you will, and made to think that, they're maybe meeting someone who obviously is not that person on the other end. Right. It's just a revolving door of problems and unsecure stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, you just heard from Nurse Nicole. She and I, Nurse Jody O'Malley, are on Nurses Out Loud. This is a radio show on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, where you hear from a different nurse host daily. And we are celebrating, I think, almost 2 years now of being on this network, which has afforded us just such a space where we can speak uncensored. Guys, we still have the First Amendment. People ask me, I can't believe you're a nurse and you are not afraid to speak out like that. And I always tell people, ethics, right? Our ethical principles are what guides us. In any profession that you're in, ethical principles guide you. And if you're staying within that framework and you are speaking, in regards to, first of all, we have our opinion. Okay. We still can speak. We still have our First Amendment, which allows us to speak. And if we're speaking on ethics, which the four of us here, appear to be pretty ethical people and stepping out against the narrative, then, don't be afraid to speak out. The time to, keep your head in the sand is no longer. We really need to use our voices and empower one another to share share this show, guys. Share what is put out on Nurses Out Loud platform. These types of things are how you can help to use your voice. So we are going to take a short break. Please go to americaoutloud.shop and check out our family of sponsors. Chemical Free Body is one of my favorite products that we use. I use the Green 85 drink to get my vital nutrients and minerals into my diet. We know that the government, oh my goodness, we could just go on and on about the government, guys. They have just depleted our soil, with all these pesticides and everything that they are spraying. I mean, even look at fluoride. Judge just ruled there to say that there aren't enough studies to show that fluoride is beneficial. So they have to pull fluoride out of our drinking water. These types of things, guys, like we need to know, we need to be up to date. And it's programs like Viewpoint on Sunday or Nurses Out Loud or any of the other ones that you hear on this network that will give you some education and insight that you can, have discussions with your families or your family and friends, and share our shows on social media and see what people come back and say, and you can create thoughtful dialogue. Well, when we return from break, guys, we're going to talk a little bit more about the court notices that seem to go to addresses unknown or agency communication. And then we are going to pick up here on to finish out the second half concerning the intersection of politics and the leadership and crisis management in the wake of Hurricane Helene and Milton. We have Nurse Nicole, who is right there in the thick of it and will give us her insights. So stay tuned, and we will be right back after the break. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me. I'm filling in. This is Jody O'Malley filling in for Malcolm here on Viewpoint Sunday. Okay, ladies, let's address this. So the court notices. The report noted that more than 291,000 unaccompanied migrant children had not received a notice to appear in court. So this report mentions that 291,000 children, their sponsors did not receive a notice to appear in court. What challenges do you see in the current system that leads to such a high number? Tara?
Well, we can start with, it's absolutely shocking that a child would not receive their notice to appear. That was the most important document for the child, because the purpose of the child and the sponsor is that they would go to their immigration hearing. But that notice to appear is the identification of the child. It has their official photo. It has all of their biographical information. That information is necessary for their immigration hearing, but also if they need to go to the doctor, if they need to register for school, if they need to do anything, that is their identification. They need that NTA, that notice to appear. So that is absolutely astounding that the system began to get so overwhelmed that they couldn't even provide the most basic important document to the child. Again, it shows a total failure on the part of this program, complete failure.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Bonnie?
Absolutely. That notice to appear, one of the things that we would tell those unaccompanied children when they came was that notice to appear actually gives them legal standing here in this country. An adult can't use that to go get a job. They can't use that as proof of citizenship or anything. But under the statute, they have the right, once someone has that notice to appear, they have the right to wait for that notice to appear and for that opportunity to appear in court here in the United States. So one of the biggest, that was actually a huge tool I had that I utilized in order to combat trafficking with these UCs, is I would tell them, no matter what anyone tells you, you have a notice to appear. You have the right to be here in this country. And those police, if you need help, you can go to them. You can go to a government official. You can go to a police, and they cannot take you out of this country until that notice to appear is satisfied. And so for those children to not have those notices to appear, it just is one more level of victimization, of exploitation, and one more layer that the traffickers can use. Because when you cannot tell a child you don't have that right to be here in this country, that narrative that's told to them that they can't for the police, how do you combat that? And so that notice to appear is vital. If they're going to let those children in, send them to sponsors, I don't see how they can, should, or would. Well, I can see how they would, but I don't see, how they would send them to the sponsors without that notice to appear.
Yeah. Wow. Right. That's their papers.
Yeah.
That's their papers. And if they don't have it, then they could think like, oh, I'm just lost here in this system. I mean, really, like we can't even see if they were ever here or not, right? I mean, exactly. Their life even matters at that point to them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have here a lack of communication between government agencies. Could that mean that a notice is sent to the wrong address? Like, how could we improve to prevent issues like the notices being sent to a wrong address?
Well, the children, oh, go ahead, Bonnie.
No, please, Tara, please.
I was going to say the children are supposed to get those notices to appear before they actually come to HHS. They're supposed to get that at processing at the Border Patrol. So why that began to fail, the only thing that I can begin to speculate is that they were just too overwhelmed with too many people. So that is a clear indication that their system is broken. So they should have stopped releasing children with no paperwork into the country and said, no, we need to protect these little lives. I mean, these are small children. They're 6, they're 7. Yes, some of them are teens. The oldest they can be is 17 to be in this program. So you're talking about children who need this vital document. So again, it shows it's a total failure, a lack of serious consideration for the children. There is no lack of care, or there's demonstration of care and concern for the safety and the well-being of the children if they're being released this in this haphazard manner. It's really shocking. It's shocking.
Yeah. And so much of it's shocking. Even after my eyes being opened these last 4 years, I'm still continuously shocked. And I hear from people all day long. Not only do I read, the comments that, people are putting out on social media and stuff, but, a lot of it, I work out in a rural area in the ER, and I'm seeing a lot of migrants, if you will, right, coming in to our emergency room. And people don't understand, we talk about it being a humanitarian crisis. And certainly that documentary, James O'Keefe's Line in the Sand, in conjunction on the Tucker Carlson network, guys, really shows the crisis that they're having. But also, too, let's talk about our healthcare system and how they are weighing down our healthcare system. It's mind-blowing to me that people don't see the big picture. Thank you for your thoughts there, ladies. But let's move on to the second segment where, I think we're at a critical intersection of where politics and disaster response in our recent crises, with the Hurricane Helene and then Milton that followed, 10 days or so after that, I think it has the potential to shape the outcomes of our elections this November. I mean, it's just a few weeks away. And also too, we're seeing how some politicians are coming out and trying to take the spotlight, if you will, and making it. I don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of complexities in managing a crisis in a political landscape, as you know, as we see here in America. But there's also roles of leaderships and the implications of governmental response and the dynamics that are at play when disasters become intertwined with political narrative. Now, Nurse Nicole, she is there in Florida. Nicole, talk to us. Where are you located there? And, you know, any thoughts that you have with politics being at play?
Well, I mean, I'm outside of Central Florida, so closer to the Orlando area. We were not as affected by Hurricane Helene. However, the West Coast, Tampa Bay, St. Pete, those areas were completely leveled areas. And we are very fortunate to have a governor who's always been for the people, Governor Ron DeSantis, who was around during that. He was out being seen, having, state resources come to assist accordingly. Obviously, devastation with Hurricane Helene was quite extensive, so trying to activate teams as quickly as possible. And then as soon as they realized what was going on in Western North Carolina, had him deploy members out into that area to try to help, only to be turned around when Hurricane Milton came and completely re-leveled, the West Coast and also into the Central Florida area where I am, where we have never seen this kind of damage before. And we're not really expecting the level of damage. As a matter of fact, I just got power back a few hours ago. We had been out for almost 48 plus hours. We're thankful enough to have a generator and linemen that were deployed from all over the United States to come help us, because it was estimated that over 3 million Floridians were without power. And what I think people need to understand is the devastation that comes with. Not everyone can have a generator. Those of us that had a generator, we had a gas shortage. We had multiple gas stations within, 10-mile radius of gas because people were trying to stock up. And then what happens to individuals that are vulnerable in these communities that are affected by these hurricanes or displaced, that might have special needs or have require oxygen or, tube feeds, or individuals that require a lot of care. And so our governor was able to activate special needs shelters that you could have applied to go, and they would have medical teams there, part of a Central Florida disaster team. However, because we were affected, we could not be deployed because we were part of the hospital systems, if you work in the hospital as well. So the political game, if you will, that we saw, we had really good leadership. You have a quicker response time. You have people that are getting help. Where we saw in Western North Carolina, we saw that the governor delayed activation. We saw the disappointing effect of FEMA not show when they were supposed to. And then when they did show, were turning people away. They had citizens showing because no one else was, who were trying to bring aid, and they were turned away. We had people that had air support, private helicopters, fixed-winged airplanes, trying to bring in and drop off goods. And then now the federal government is coming in and stopping these individuals and saying, basically the terrain is not safe, and we don't know if the products that you're bringing are safe, and trying to halt all of that. Meanwhile, people are stuck in the mountains over a week with no one to get them, and citizens pulling out their own community members from mudslides and bodies of water. And so it was really unfortunate. So we actually just did a podcast on Nurses Out Loud, was titled FEMA Who? Look for the Helpers, and really highlighting that, no, the government is not here to save you. However, like you said, Jody, they are responsible to come in because it is a safety, and they are in place given billions of dollars a year that Congress does a lot and decides to then turn around and help during these disasters. And what we're seeing is a media censorship. They're saying that they're there, they're helping, that there's no such thing as, them turning people away. But then you have these blasts of social media community members basically pleading for help, saying the exact opposite of what the media is saying. And so it shows you that you've still got this disconnect where someone's hiding something. There's some sort of problem, and our community members pleading, but the incredible human beings that stood up, who have come from all over the United States, who have put money that they don't have, because this economy is atrocious, into helping thy neighbor, and how much that has impacted when you look at helpers and been able to come in and help these individuals, where our politicians and certain individuals in the federal government really just have lacked time and time again. So unfortunately, it is political. It shouldn't be. It doesn't matter what side you're on. We're here for humanity. And I think we've seen a lot of really great things come of these terrible disasters. But I think it's another kind of situation like the pandemic. Really bad things had to happen so that we could see the corruption and the lack of, and then what happens when our communities come together to help each other when your government is missing in action.
Yeah, absolutely. Donald Trump said on the Biden administration's response, they've let those people suffer unjustly. How does Donald Trump's assertion that the Biden administration has let those people suffer unjustly reflect the broader criticisms of disaster management and politics? Bonnie, would you like to take that?
Could you repeat that last little bit?
Yeah. Do you think Donald Trump, it says, how does Donald Trump's assertion that the Biden administration has let those people suffer unjustly reflect broader criticisms of disaster management and politics?
Well, the fact that he brings forth, that it's unjust, that they're not making decisions based on, justice, meaning outcomes that are proper and aligned with our societal expectations, but they're making decisions based on what aligns with their viewpoints, their political. Disaster relief, there should be no political concern. Yet many times decisions are made in this arena, in this area, that are more in line with how does this help me? How does this help me? Not how does that help that victim?
Right, absolutely. And many would think that, or many of us feel that the border being open is a disaster. It is a 100%. Crisis, and so, I think Candace Bright Hallworth says that disasters are politicized when they have political value to the candidate. Tara, how would you, Candace notes that the disasters have become politicized for candidates. In what ways can this politicalization be harmful to effective disaster response? Whether at the border or a hurricane, really.
Yeah. Well, you can see now people are trying to shift narratives and shift their beliefs right as we're coming up to an election, right? So we've had years of somebody's record and what they've been saying on the issue, but then as soon as it's getting right down to where people are going to be voting, then they suddenly change their entire policy. So there are people who are playing politics, but to the example of your governor, DeSantis, that Nurse Nicole said, or our governor, Glenn Youngkin, he was out, he wasn't politicizing, he was leading. He's saying, you Virginians are not alone. I'm here. You're going to see me on the ground with you. I'm going to be prepared. These are the places we're going to have people. We're going to have helicopters stationed here. We're going to be doing X. We're going to be doing Y. I'm going to be here with you. You are not alone. And so some of the governors who have been out there leading, they're actually leading. That's not playing politics. That's actually fulfilling the oath of your office. That's doing what the people elected you to do, which was to take care of your citizens. At a basic level, that's what government is taking care of the people in your charge. It's about service. So if it is something different than that, you have to start saying, well, why would somebody be doing that? Right? So I think that this just goes to show who actually is a leader and who really cares about the people that they're leading. Are you on the ground? Are you doing things for people? Or are you FEMA showing up late to the game, offering $750 after you have depleted all of your coffers, giving billions of dollars to people crossing the border?
Right.
That just doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Not at all.
So I think it revealed some very interesting things about how the federal government is spending money. So you have people who are disaster victims who they're told they're going to get $750. And from reports, people aren't even getting that money.
That's right.
They aren't able to get the $750 they're applying for if they have internet to even apply for it. But there are other people who are living in hotels with free food and free cell phones and living fine. And there's no more money for the people who really need it. If somebody really was leading from the front, they would say, okay, today we're stopping all spending on all projects outside of the United States until we first take care of our people in North Carolina, in South Georgia, all the places that were affected, in Florida. We're going to take care of our people first. Americans come first, and I'm here to make sure that you are taken care of. I didn't hear that from anyone.
Yeah. Nope. No. And a lot of people are calling for, our government to stop sending money overseas until we are taken care of. Kamala Harris says, I have to stress that this is not a time to play politics. But how realistic is it for political figures to avoid politicizing disaster response when facing a significant electoral pressure? What do you think, Nicole?
All I is that there's been speculation that in Western North Carolina, between the lithium and the quartz mines that have now been flat and leveled, that her spouse potentially has reign over this area, and for her to continue to downplay and deflect and pretend that she has, nothing to do with the response, if you will, even if it isn't true about the lithium and quartz mines and how they're going to come in and try to take over that, you're not showing up for the people. You are not setting an example. You are here for photo ops. You have people literally dying. We have communities, there's a mule pack that are literally taking their mules through this terrain to deliver insulin to people. You have the Cajun Army who is literally flying in their helicopters to help. You have all these people that somehow can get to these individuals that government are telling you they cannot reach because it's not safe or it's going to take time. Yet you have these people already doing it, and then you're trying to tell them to stand down. It just shows you once more how important it is to have strong leadership. And when you don't have that from a local and state and federal level, how devastating that can be. And I really hope that, unfortunately, it is going to impact voting. There's obviously a lot of individuals that are displaced that may not be able to show now to vote or not be able to receive their mail-in ballot. However that may be, you have this that could potentially affect the voting in these larger states that really count when the electoral votes, and these individuals that won't be able to exercise, so that we try to prevent this happening again for the next 4 years. Again, it's just showing you time and time again how they handled the pandemic response, how they've been handling all these disaster responses. It's a constant letdown. So unfortunately, it's infuriating. It's infuriating.
It is. I think, there's a quote, the government isn't coming to save you. Something to that effect. If a government shows up at your door and says, I'm here to help, run the other way. And that certainly, I think, for many of us has really resonated with us over these last 4 years. But what we have seen in droves of people, that the resilience of the American spirit. And guys, we are Americans. We love our immigrants. We just don't want them to come here illegally. We don't want them to drain our already taxed system. And that's what's happening. And also, as Bonnie and Tara have revealed, it's not a humanitarian effort to get people to come over here from the countries. What we are creating is just, you know, a bunch of people that probably have been sold one thing and, you know, they're living out another reality. They were sold the possibilities to come here and the American, you know, spirit and, you know, all the possibilities that can happen in America. But so many now are, you know, just trafficked and they are like indentured servants, essentially. And people don't understand that. You know, I thank you for joining me this time, but it is time for us to go. But it's time to get involved and get loud, America.